response, particularly Jess, in regards to my question in regards to laminate flooring, which was answered suitably, so thank them for that.
It's all been fixed up. Thank you, Jess. It was quite a major, and thank you for raising that, Councillor Body, and a lot of people have been caught out with that, so that's been sorted. So thank you, Jess. Thank you, Councillor Body. Okay, any other queries of those minutes? Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Mack, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Right, 4.1, and we'll go to 4.5 now, which is a request for alteration of the Taupō Reserve Management Plan by Taupō Moana Group Holdings to extend the lease period to 30 years. A couple of fine gentlemen here, and also Rake, I've allowed Mr. Rake to Tangaroa to say a few words regarding this. So, not sure which is the best way around. Nick, do you want to have some opening comments first, or?
Yes, that's probably best. This is Andrew's paper, so I'll let him.
Sorry, Chair, just to declare, I have an interest in that. Sorry, we didn't cover off point 2, conflicts of interest. So just 4.5, please.
Naughty Chairman. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Sorry, we'll just go back to that. Councillor Kingi is relating to to this item as a conflict of interest. So thank you, Councillor Kingi. Was there any other conflicts of interest while we're at it? No? Cool. Thank you. Does it need to be moved? No. Okay. Thanks, Councillor Kingi. Sorry about that. Jumped the gun. Right, Andrew. Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon. So Taupō Moana Holdings Group has
Here we go.
Cool.
Taupō Moana Group Holdings has requested that they get a amendment to the reserve management plan for the hole-in-one site. So currently they're allowed a lease of 15 years. They'd like that extended for a further 15 years to 30 years. They've advised that the reason for this is that 15 years would not see a return on their investment, which would be substantial on that site to provide the improvements. So that 30-year lease would be necessary in that case. Blake will speak to that point. We're not going to discuss that particular aspect of it any further. However, we believe that 15 years, as advised previously, is a balance between Taupō Moana Group Holdings' interests and Council's interest in potentially improving that space between Rurupe and Te Raupenga in the future. A right of renewal has been considered, so if 15 years, then with a further right of renewal for a further 15 would be appropriate, but that would functionally be the same as a 30-year lease, which would then limit Council's flexibility to improve that area in the future. However, if Council wishes to extend that lease period, you can do so. However, that would mean an amendment to the current reserve management plan. This can be amended without consultation with the community, as the community's views are already known, and this is allowed for under Section 41 of the Reserves Act.
We're quite happy to take any questions now on the report, but it may well be that you want to hear from Rake first.
Yeah, I think we just get Rake up. I'm sure he's just got a few things to say, so we'll get that out of the way if that's okay. Kia ora and good afternoon, Rake. Good to have you here, mate.
Kia ora, Your Worship and Councillors. Thank you very much for putting me up the agenda. That's very helpful, so I appreciate that. Going to the matter, certainly appreciate the process that was, I suppose, adjudicated by Mr. Williamson. We're very happy with that. It's really the term, Your Worship, and not to go too deeply into numbers, since it is quite a public forum, the proposed development would be around $1 million. I've provided the detail to your staff. And primarily it's over a 15-year period. Certainly will, in my view, will be able to, how can I say, still run very well, but it's just that 15-year stop. Then what would happen then? We'd have to put it all down. What would we have to do? Certainly from ourselves and sent through the reserves process, we want to make this an iconic development. Not only one that Tūwhara is proud of, but also the town is proud of. It already is an iconic activity, as we all know, but it's just really that the immediacy of the 15 years would make things a little bit interesting in terms of how big we go, in terms of what's been allowed by the Road and Reserves Committee. But I'm happy to answer any other
Thanks,
questions.
Rake. Thank you very much, Rake. Any questions of Rake while he's here? No? All good. Thank you very much, Rake. Appreciate
very
you
much for
coming
your time.
today in support of the item here.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Andrew and Nick, any final comments or?
No, we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
Cool. Any questions? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Can you advise, are there any other leases granted on council reserves that go beyond 15 years currently?
I honestly couldn't say with any certainty. I know we've got some significant buildings sitting on reserves. The Squash Club comes to mind. But I couldn't honestly say what the term of those different lease arrangements is. I don't know, Gareth, you... Sorry.
No battery here.
So I can't, I'm like you, Nick, I can't say the exact term, but I know that there are a variety, Councillor, going out right up to the maximum of the 33. I know we did the Bungee site a while ago, which was a significant period of time to allow the investment to occur there.
Sorry, through the chairs, what I'm getting at is how far out of the norm this would be relative to other developments on council reserves is what I'm getting at. And sorry, at the risk of, I don't want to grandstand, but I made this point at the Road and Reserves Committee. I believed this item should have come to full council because of the significance of it in the first place, and here we are. So that's not a shot at anyone particularly, that's just my thoughts on the matter. So I'm really just trying to get a gauge on how out of kilter this would be relative to other things that we have done as a council.
I think through you, Your Worship, I think it really comes down to that level of investment that's been made and how that feels in terms of the length, the tenure. There's many of our leases, several of them are very temporary and short-term in nature. In fact, Road and Reserves Committee approved some summer licences, summer licences at its last meeting. So everything from one summer right through to, say, the maximum term before you need a subdivision consent has been approved, basically depending on that level of investment. So if you think of some like the tennis club and the bowling club with a high level of investment, they usually have a long term, and sometimes they're cut up in different ways. So it might be a 10 plus 10 plus 10, or a one term of 30, or whatever. However it sort of works out as being the best at the time.
Through the chair. I just want to pick up on Councillor Taylor's point. I hear what he's saying, but I think the timing with the Roads and Reserves Committee, a delegated authority to make these decisions, that hadn't been for the timing, it would have probably still come back to our committee. So, but I think I tend to take a bit of a world view, look at this as my world view anyway. Look at this activity's been there for 25 years. I think with the extra take on the officers' view that, in the future there may be, we don't know what you don't know, but there could be still accommodating this activity and still accommodate what development could go around that, for example, all the infrastructure's there. So I sort of would support the extension, whether it's negotiable, where, as Gareth pointed out, 33 years is the maximum. It may be sort of hasn't happened before to offer it all at once, usually often their right of renewals, but I would support an extension. There may be some negotiation around the term, or just more than 15 years. I don't know whether Raiko would like to add to that, or how the council feels about that as well.
Term as in the monetary payment?
To extend the 15-year period a bit further, maybe not to 30 years, but
Okay.
some
Lower. no other conditions around it.
Well, I wouldn't, you probably can't put conditions if they certify resource consent, all the resource consent factors, but whether just extend the term from 15 years to some other, a little more than 15, but not 30.
Councillor Mack.
Sorry, not on that committee, but obviously reading the recommendation here, I suppose the question I've got is that this is a business opportunity, as in it is a business that's been there a long time. It's not a building. It could be that they're going to put improvements on it. The issue I would have is if you go over 15 years, will you then set a precedent for other businesses, not buildings or structures? Would you then get people coming along and saying, well, actually, you've now got a precedent and I want more than 15 years as well?
Yeah, so look, precedent is all about the exact situation has to be able to be replicated, and so you'd have to have an exactly the same situation, which frankly you don't have. This is very unique. Coming back to Councillor Williamson's point, we don't have another activity at the moment in that same situation. And what I understand from Rake, and Rake can provide more detail, but what I understand is that this, whilst it might not be buildings, it's the structure that is required, and it's a for example a cantilevered platform for the activity, which is quite the significant investment that Rake alluded to when he was presenting. So whilst it's not a building, it's still $1 million of structure.
Okay, any other? Yep.
Mr. Chairman, from my point of view, if we read the conclusion that the officers of the staff have given, I think it's quite important. If I could just read out, it will however ensure that council can consider changes to the reserve and the surrounding roading system will be beneficial to the public and enhance the community's enjoyment of the space in 15 years' time. The nub of it to me reads, if it would not, then council can consider granting a further lease period to the hole-in-one challenge operator. I would be happy to move if there's no other further discussion, to move the resolution that council maintains the current reserve management plan, which will allow for a 15-year lease on the hole-in-one site.
Okay, I think that's been moved by Councillor Boddy. And does he have a seconder for that? Okay, so appears to be no seconder there. So, so the other option is to extend the lease period to 30 years, correct? That's what's been requested, yep.
Well, that is one option. There is a lot of ground in between the two, I would suggest, and you have, as has been suggested, a right of renewal for 15 years, but there's nothing to stop a right of renewal 5 plus 5 plus 5, I would suggest, unless there is something in the legislation or in our policies that prevent that. And that gives certainty, and it gives the opportunity, should things dramatically change in 15 years, then things are up for negotiation, but it does give that right of renewal in the absence of anything else coming along. That would be my suggestion as a halfway ground.
Any support for that? So suggest as a 15-year lease plus right of renewal for 15.
Well, you could go 10, or you could go 5 plus 5 plus 5, or any combination of the above.
So just through the chair.
Councillor Mack.
Again, I'm just trying to get my head around why we've made a recommendation as council for 15. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we normally take recommendations from you. I haven't been on that committee. I need to know why you've recommended 15 then.
Just to be really clear, when this matter was before the Taupo Reserves and Roading Committee, the matter of the lease term was considered as part of the overall basket of changes that were presented in terms of the reserve management plan. With regard to the lease term, there was discussion and advice was provided by Alison Rawley, the consultant at the time, around the balance that council faced between providing some certainty to the applicant who was looking for the change, but also some certainty to council, in that we'd signalled that we're obviously doing major changes in the town centre, and that the next logical area to look at change would be between Ruapehu Street and Titirawapinga Street, so where the hole-in-one operation is. We don't know what that change might look like. We don't know when council will have the funds to undertake that work, but the 15-year term was seen as a way of providing both parties with a reasonable level of certainty. When this paper was drafted, we weren't aware of any more information coming to the table that would cause us to change that advice to you. So that officer advice has maintained consistency. You've heard from Rake today in terms of the financial impetus that they have. So really it's up to you as elected members to debate and to decide what you're comfortable with as a level of certainty for yourselves as a council and certainty for the applicant who's obviously running a business that you want to see in that location. So that's why the advice has been framed up the way it has.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I suppose on that understanding, I would be the same as Councillor Taylor on that. I agree that 15 years plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 maybe, so that you know in 15 years there will be some security for the venture, but also in 15 years or 20 years, if things change, we have the option to then, you know, change with it. I'm not saying that the venture will disappear, but it does give us that ability.
Through the chair, I think obviously 15 plus 5, 3 5-year renewals gives basically more certainty to the applicant, but obviously it would depend, I guess I'm just speculating whether at some stage in the future we do a comprehensive review of the RMP, whether it would change the parameters or some of the conditions or some of the factors around what would be happening there, depending on what we don't know. But to me it's a bit more than just the financial investment they're making. To me, it's just the fact they've been there, said before, a long time, and I would imagine still to be in the future. So I support them just on that factor only.
Through you, Your Worship, just as a suggestion, 5 years tends to flow around pretty quickly, and just with administratively it becomes a bit of an issue, and you've raised a very good point, Councillor Williamson, in terms of the reserve management planning, which has a 10-year cycle. So just something to float or for consideration would be a 15 plus 10 plus 5, which would just reduce that same impact, but just reduce that and get it into a cycle.
Councillor Taylor.
So based on our Chief Executive's advice, I'm happy to move along those lines. Waiting for the words to come up on the screen. 15 years, right of renewal, 10 years plus 5 after that, and I'm conscious of the administrative burden that 3 lots of 5 years would put on. Don't want to create unnecessary work, so I'm happy to move that.
Okay.
Through the chair, I'm happy to second that.
Happy to second that. So that's been moved by Councillor Taylor and seconded by Councillor Williamson. Do I have anyone that wants to speak against that? Councillor Body?
Could I make a suggestion? Mr. Councillor Taylor can help me out. By putting the 15-year lease plus 5, it doesn't mean that the 5 years is going to be given. It's a fact of life. It may not be given. So I cannot see any reason why it can't stay at 15 with the right of the applicant to ask for another 5 years or 10 years. So I'll be voting against the resolution.
So just through the chair, what you're doing here is amending, you're not amending the lease, you're amending the reserve management plan, which then provides for that lease to happen. So if you didn't do it this way, then and my understanding would be that at the end of that term or before the end of the term, we'd have to go back through another reserve management plan process. So this enables it to occur.
Okay. Can I just go back to the council? There's no support for the 30-year straight lease for the level of investment they've gone to do. Doesn't appear to be any support for that, so refer back to the option proposed by Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Williamson. Anyone else want to talk to that suggested recommendation? No? Okay, well I'll put it to the table that the council amends the current Tupu reserve management plan, which allows for a 15-year lease with right of renewal for 10 plus 5 on the lease of the hole-in-one site. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Like that recorded, Councillor Body? Yeah.
Order, thank you.
Thank you very much. Motion is passed. Thank you. Right. We now go to 4.1. Correct? 4.1, Roberts Street and Lower Tongariro Street, a licence to occupy business. Licences to occupy. Travis, good afternoon, Travis.
Afternoon, councillors and your worship. I will take the item as read. However, I'll just do a quick overview of the item. This is something that went to the Road and Reserves Committee last week. It is requesting delegation for Gareth to approve the licenses to occupy and structures that fit within the design guidelines approved by the Road and Reserves Committee. And the reason for this is with the rapid nature of the town center project and the timelines and the elections and various other items, we want these businesses to have the best opportunity to hit the ground running and not sort of get caught up in our process, if you will, just so we can get them trading and get that lakefront and Tongariro Street humming, because some of the businesses haven't been able to pull together everything required at this stage, and we just want to be ready for them when they're ready.
Cool. Thanks, Trevor. Councillor Park.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. As a member of that committee, I completely agree with this recommendation. You know, with the council elections approaching, there's going to be some time lapses between the existing training and the swearing in of the new council, and I think it would be unwise going into the first peak summer where there are going to be freedoms for everyone to run their businesses how they choose to delay that due to just purely process. And I have full confidence that the CEO will make the right decisions when it comes to these leases. So I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Any other questions of Travis, or is any seconder ready for Councillor Park? Seconded by Councillor Guy. Thank you. Okay, the recommendation is up there. All the fine businesses, and concur with what you're saying, Councillor Park. It's coming along quite quick down there, Trevor, isn't it? So good to get that tidied up so they can trade over Christmas or whatever. So moved by Councillor Park, seconded by Councillor Guy. All those in favour, please say aye. It's against, carried. Thank you, Travis. 4.2, land swap, Rangatira Road, Mangakino. Good afternoon, Philip. Mr. Philip King, Property Manager. Good afternoon, Philip.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Councillors. This item relates to a piece of land that Council own as a service lane which is not used by the public, which is landlocked in Mangakino. And we were approached by the developer back in 2021 in relation to whether we'd be able to acquire that land to do some residential housing development on that piece of land. And we went up a couple of weeks ago, we went and met with the MPRG and discussed three of the options there, and the option that they've recommended that I bring to this table for your approval is the land swap option 3, which is laid out in the paper there, with the proviso that we negotiate with the developer around the style of fencing there to ensure that it's going to contribute in a positive way to the town centre and the reserve land that's out there. Happy to take any questions.
Cool. Any questions of Philip? Councillor Truman? No? Yeah.
Mangakino-Pouakani representative group have discussed this fully and have made this recommendation to council. This is the land that is most preferred out of the options because it's right next to our skate park, and it just gives a bit of a buffer to those sections which are going to be sold as residential property. So yes, I'd like to move it.
Cool. Thanks. Moved by Councillor Truman. Any other discussion? Over seconder, please. Yeah, seconded by Councillor Mack. Thank you, Philip. All those in favour, please say aye. It's against, carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 4.3, appointment of Commissioner, delegation of proposed land use consent for the proposed solar farm. Hearing and decision. Jess, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Heather sends her apologies. She's at home with the dreaded COVID, so
Oh.
you've got me today instead.
Okay.
I'll take the item as read. This is regarding the hearing for the land use consent for this new solar farm out on State Highway 5. Mr. Crafer, who is wanting to be heard at the hearing, has requested that a non-local authority commissioner be appointed. So we have endorsed Mr. Bill Wolseley to undertake that.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Park.
Just through the chair, I know that we've used Bill before, and he's fantastic at what he does, but he is also a Tauranga City Council Commissioner, so obviously he's been asked about that he has the time to undertake this as well.
Yes, he has. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions of Jess? Very good. Okay, can I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Rankin, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Williamson. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thanks, Jess. 4.4, terms of reference for the Turangi Wastewater Steering Group. Tony.
Kia ora, Worship. Kia ora, Councillors. First of all, before I start, I'll take the item as read, but I also just want to come up with an apology. There's been a slight administrative error with the attachment of the terms of reference to the paper in front of you. And Shani is very helping me out here by just circulating in a hard copy, and I will touch on that probably first and foremost. But really just to echo some of the points in the paper. Basically what we want to do here is increase the membership of the steering group. Therefore that requires an updated terms of reference, and also in the terms of reference are some refreshed timeframes and reporting around progress of the steering group as we move forward. But certainly on the attachment you've got in front of you, just the highlighted areas there were not in the copy that you received, and it's more talking about the actual 4 representatives from TDC as determined appropriate by the Chief Executive, and then any future additional changes to the steering group not to come to the council chambers, can be resolved internally. The steering group, that is.
Okay, Councillor Park.
Yeah, just through the chair, is it common practice for us, and this might be for our governance team, in addition, any future changes to the steering group membership will not require council approval? Is that quite a usual thing, considering that this is a steering group of a council project with a lot of external, non-elected or external representatives? I understand the nature of the steering group, but I just wonder if it's normal practice.
Tony, you want to answer that one, or?
Shane?
I guess really coming from the angle of the fact that it's a consenting process and pretty much approached as a BAU, business as usual operational issue. Yep, sure, we had a steering group, probably in some respects no different from some of the other ones that we operate with, significant projects across council operational business.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I'd sit with Councillor Park's question on that. I appreciate it's business as usual, but it's a significant piece of business, and in the Three Waters environment we're in, I'm uncomfortable making a resolution here at the council level to appoint people and then cutting it adrift for any other additions. So I just think that's a double standard, and I'm uncomfortable with that line being in there. We're either all in or not. In my view, we should be all in.
I think through the chair. I think through the chair, as the sort of chair of that steering group, last couple of years, the first thing obviously there might be a question about the balance. I'm fairly comfortable personally, because obviously over the time there's been some hapu haven't been brought on at the start, not deliberately not brought on, but So that factor, but I just wonder whether for Taupō District Council reps, does it, a bit open-ended in terms of that, would that not necessarily, I would think one councillor would probably still be required to be on there, seeing it's district council, or one representing that group, but could you just clarify for Taupō District Council representatives, that means the councillors or just the staff, or?
So that's
as determined by
including in councillors.
As determined by
and
the
staff.
CEO here.
Yep.
That part I don't have a problem, but I mean,
So Tony, would you have a problem removing the line where anyone can come on board as required, or it would have to be by council?
No, I don't have any issues with that.
Is that what you were suggesting, Councillor Taylor?
No, so the way I'm reading this, it's not that individuals would change, but the structure of those who would be there would be changed. So at a structural level, that's how I'm reading that. So the membership would include different other entities or groups that may come on. If we're going to vote on what entities and groups as listed there, and then take our hands off, I see a problem with that. I don't want to get down in the weeds with who those individuals are representing that group. No, that should not be our business, and leave that alone. But structurally, I think it's important. If we're going to do that here, I have an issue with us taking our hands off it after that.
So you're removing point 7. Yeah, additional representatives. That one?
Yeah.
I think through the chair, just perhaps the rationale between just changing from 3 senior council reps and 1 councillor. What was the logic or the rationale behind, just the 4 Taupō District Council representatives as determined appropriate by the CEO?
So we just go back to that the first one there. Is everyone happy with that line being removed? Suggested by Councillor Taylor. Councillor Kingi?
Yeah, thanks you. I was just going to raise, and it may well have been considered earlier. So when I looked at that from a representation perspective, I got the gist of it, which was fine. The only one that I thought that might apply to potentially was Ngāti Hikairo, how they back around coming in from Rangipo, where I know there was some consideration ages ago around a something along there. So if we take the 7 out, because the 7's how I thought if that particular hapu needed to have input, that would provide that ability. And I don't know if we've had any engagement with them, or whether there's any, whether they would be happy to be there. But if that's taken out, I wonder whether we do need to ask that question of them. Is there a claim for them around, if we were to consider an area that encroached on their tribal boundaries?
Any suggestion there, Tony? Have you discussed anything with that? Where have these names come from?
So these names have come from the steering group, as we've kind of hit some stumbling blocks, and then the consensus of opinion around the steering group was to invite 3 further hapu members around the steering group, so that we can get in front.
So Tony, wouldn't it be right to say that if point 7 wasn't in there, and then if the situation occurred that Councillor Kingi talks about, that it goes into another hapu boundary, whichever that is, or whatever that is, because the disposal field, as an example, was somewhere different, then that would simply, without clause 7, it would simply mean that we need to bring that back to council at the time to get that included.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, that's how I sort of, I guess I interpreted that. So again, I don't know whether Ngāti Hikairo actually have a view on this or not, but it was that's the specific thing I was thinking about. If there was some discussion along that that flank that goes towards Rangipo, they might well want to be involved. But thanks for the explanation, Karen.
Councillor Park and Councillor Mack.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I know that we're just talking about terms of reference here, and I understand the importance of taking hapu on the journey from the very beginning, because it's something that I'm a big in favour of. However, if the steering group, which is of a minimum of 7 hapu representatives and 4 council representatives, make recommendations to council on use of ratepayers' money, I'm just not sure how I feel about non-elected people making recommendations to council, which from a cultural and engagement perspective, there'd be no reason why you probably wouldn't accept their recommendations. But there just seems to me a little bit of imbalance and lack of elected representatives, maybe. I don't know. It just feels really uncomfortable to me that this steering group will make recommendations to council, and council then can either approve or decline, but it is ratepayers' money that's going to be paying for the projects. And it just sits very uncomfortably with me that more non-elected people will give a recommendation to council, and it's the principles of it, it's not who's involved. Then there is elected people who are elected by residents and ratepayers to be the guardians and look after the long-term projects of the district.
Councillor Truman?
If it's any help, like our Mangakino-Pouakani representative group has more people that aren't councillors on it, and we just gave that last recommendation. So I think if it's people from the community, we're going to get a really good feel of what the community wants. Yeah, and then it comes back to council to then make the decision, but you're getting that real community view.
From what I understand, this is all on privately owned land?
So we have options that we're looking at with certain areas of land. And just to echo that point around that Councillor Parks has made, we also have, part of the setup is also a TAG group, so we have a technical advisory group who are experts in their field. And of course then that if we require further technical work done, then that will come back into the steering group. And then obviously in reports will come back to council from there.
Councillor Mack?
So I just got a couple. So on 8, the 4 council representatives, I personally think you have to have an elected member. And the only reason I say that is because we at council would need to be able to rely on that person as well to, if you like, communicate with us what's going on. You know, it's very hard to say, well, here's a steering group, somebody's sitting there who's got all the knowledge, and we're all in the dark going, well, okay, that's great. But at least if you've got an elected member, they can actually, like most steering groups we have, we can come here and with knowledge, if you like, think they've done everything, you know, they can, and they're relaying it to us. So that's the first one. The second one is, where in any of this is the new entity for Turangi, the representative group that's going to be down there? What happens there? Are they just going to be bypassed, the new committee?
Well, they're not bypassed, but Turangi-Tongariro are represented, obviously, with their two members on the panel. Remember that is a committee of council, the Manawhakaono committee, and so this is a recommendation. This would be likely to be a recommendation to council based on the fact that it's a financial delegation of significance, as Councillor Park talked about.
But just because you've got 2 representatives from Turangi-Tongariro, you're still bypassing the 8 people who sit for Turangi. Should they not be included somewhere to know what's happening, or are we just going to come straight to council? It's almost like saying we've got this new committee who are going to now be on behalf of Turangi, and what we're doing is we're saying, well, actually you don't matter because there's 2 people sitting here from Turangi-Tongariro, and we're just going to come straight to council.
So I'm looking to Julie. I don't know, Julie, if you want to add anything. I'm very conscious of numbers, so, but
Apologies. The way I read this was around actually preparing ourselves for a period of time where there may, not be the council to be able to come back and to provide some flexibility given the timeframes. So there's April 2023, I believe, Tony, is the deadline to have this done, and so the 4 councillor reps, as determined by the Chief Executive, gave some flexibility during that time frame. Obviously, if we had the co-governance committee up and established right now, we'd be in a different position, but that doesn't come until later. I don't know if that's helpful.
And I think there's every opportunity to get in front of those committees when they're established to provide regular updates on the project.
Through the chair, I think picking up on Julie's point about flexibility, change of governance like new triennium, etc., and the whakaaro roi, I wouldn't be adverse to including that point 7 in there, because Tony and I, we know the challenges around moving forward with negotiating with the land, particularly all the landowners and all the hapu with through the cultural, environmental, historical elements, etc. So it's quite challenging. So I would support leaving that in there, as Councillor King has explained as well.
Okay, so go to 8, so we change that to 1, including 1 elected representative. You happy with that, Tony?
I'm happy with that. I mean, the 4 is, yeah, I guess it's just how it's interpreted, but yes, happy with that. I mean, Councillor Williamson is our elected member on the steering group as chair. So
Yeah.
that, yep.
So just including 1 elected member. All right, were we going to change anything else? We're taking number 7 out.
Personally, I think it would be helpful to keep it in there, because being involved in the last 2.5 years, I think
It's a moving.
it would be quite useful to keep it in there. I mean, I know what Kevin, Councillor Taylor
Councillor
is saying
Taylor
as
has a
well, but
recommendation coming through.
No, I speak in opposition. If that's the case, I'm voting against it. I'm not wanting to exclude anybody. It's the process through which they get to be represented. And if we are going to appoint people at this level and then abdicate responsibility, sorry, I disagree. That's wrong, in my view.
Councillor Park? Thank you.
I mean, you can't have a committee of 14 or 20 people because it's not efficient, it's not effective, so I get all that. But with the meeting procedures and the preference for majority consensus decision making, and it's extremely, I think, imbalanced in some way, with no disrespect to anybody, I'm feeling along the same lines as Councillor Taylor in this regard.
Okay. Is everyone happy to pull number 7 out?
Can I just query as well? Obviously, with you just mentioning there about the interim report coming here by December 22, is this likely? With what we're talking about here, we haven't even set this committee up yet, and we're going to have a recommendation by December.
That's our intention.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Tony.
Look, we are
these Christmas cards.
setting up a series of further hui, where we are going out to hapu and talking, having a really good corridor around these things, and we've had you can really see in the paper that we've hit some stumbling blocks, obviously COVID, and not being able to get some out to as many of the hapu as we've been able to, hence why the decision of expanding it out, and yeah, I'm not pretending that it's not going to be easy, but that's our intention, and plus obviously we have very clear direction from Regional Council on by next year, by June 2023, so that's a direction
pretty clear.
So. Yep.
Okay. All right, where we're at? We're getting there? Yeah, Councillor Kingy.
Yeah, look, I'm happy either way with 7 coming or going, based on what Gareth said around how other parties might come to the table. But look, can I just commend our team for bringing this? So when I look at that, so if we think about our current facility being in the rohe of Ngāti Turangi-Tukua, I mean, when you consider other options as to where something might go or where discharge might go or whatever, you're going to encroach on other tribal boundaries. So the point of this is to ensure that we have representation from potentially other impacted hapu. And so I think it's really important that we get that right at the start, because that will generally inform the next steps. If we didn't have a good composition of people, then I think we run the risk of flying blind around looking for other steps. So I think, I just want to acknowledge the team. I think this is right in terms of what we're trying to pull together as a group. It might seem a little large, but I do see around quorum and whatnot. So I think there's some processes around there just to keep things going. But I do come back to that fundamental, that if we need to build or do something at some point in the future, it is going to be in one of these areas potentially, and therefore we will have to restart that conversation. So I think it's a good way to approach it, and making sure that everybody's there right up front.
Thank you, Councillor Kingy.
With through the chair, I just want to also acknowledge Tony and the council representatives, the officers, and also Simon Bendel, you know, the project lead on this, you know, work he's been putting in over the last 2 or 3 years as well.
Cool. Very good. Okay, Tony. I think we take number 7 out. Does that appears to be the, or do you want to leave it in? It's been a suggestion come through from Councillor Kevin Taylor. Long term. Does Councillor Taylor have any support?
Yeah, I'll support that. And the only reason I say that is because it's a timing issue anyway. You're not going to have time to replace people as this happens. I'm really struggling with December for this. If we're talking that we're all getting new elections in October, and then you've got to go from October into December and have an actual preliminary report, it's just, yeah, 7's got to go.
Okay. I don't think we worry about December. I think it's an aspirational thing from Tony, and good on you. Good on you for lunch. Interim. Okay, we take
Mr. Chairman, we've been going 4.5 years on this side, would agree, December.
Very good. Okay, there we are. There it is up there now, including one elected member. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Kingy, thank you. Moved by Councillor Taylor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Tony. Appreciate your time on that one there. 4.6, Easter Sunday Trading Policy Review. Andrew, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon again, everyone.
Well done. When can we buy our Easter eggs?
Yep, that's the question we're looking to answer. So, as you guys may be aware, we currently have a Easter Sunday trading policy.
Yes.
That's in place. This policy effectively ensures consistency across the district in Easter trading rules. The historic exemption that Taupō Town Centre has would still be in place regardless of this policy. What it does allow this policy does allow for Mangakino, for Turangi to also have their shops be open on that Easter Sunday. As the Act, the Shop Trading Hours Act, lays out, whenever you want to do anything with the Easter Sunday trading policy, you must use a special consultative procedure. And as part of that procedure, we need to adopt a statement of proposal. The current statement of proposal that's attached to the recommendation favours the current policy, and our recommendation is that we go out with a statement of proposal that basically says we don't think anything needs to change, but we need the community's feedback to make sure that that is a decision that's representative of their views as well. Aside from that, the policy itself cannot force shops to close. It can only say they're allowed to be open. It cannot dictate what times as well. It can't put limitations on timing or anything around that sort of area. So just so we're all on the same page, it basically just says you can be open.
And Andrew, ourselves in Queenstown are the only 2 locations in New Zealand?
There are a few others that have historic exemptions, but Queenstown and ourselves are the 2 major places that have the historic tourism exemptions from the old 1960s Act, I believe it is.
Went through Parliament at the time, didn't it?
Yes.
Not that I can recall it.
Yeah, yeah. So they are old exemptions from the previous Act to the current 1990 Act.
Yeah.
Yep, and they still carry forward.
Okay, councillors, Councillor Mack.
So just for confirmation, you're saying that you're going to put out, you want the status quo. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
That the statement of proposal will suggest that we maintain the status quo.
For the public input.
Yes, correct.
So why would we not put out that we want to be progressive and we would want to change it and then get feedback?
If we wanted to change it,
we wanted to be able to open in Turangi and Mangakino.
No,
you can.
The current policy allows Turangi and Mangakino to be open.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I thought you said
the reason why we want to maintain the status quo is for that fairness.
I thought you said
yeah,
it
to
allowed.
ensure
Okay.
consistency.
See, originally we included you in the deal.
If we revoke the policy, then only the Taupō Town Centre can be open during Easter due to that historic exemption.
Sorry, I should listen.
That's right. We always include Turangi. Yeah. Very good, Andrew. Very well put. Is anyone adverse to that changing the current
Yeah, so that would just be to adopt a statement of proposal so we can go out and consult with the community. The intention is to then bring a final report for final deliberation by December in front of the new elected members.
Cool. Thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, suggestions 1 and 2 up there. Do I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Mack. Seconded by Councillor Park. All those in favour, please say aye. It's against. Carried. Thank you, Andrew.
Just before you do, Mr. Chairman, if I can refer to the council agenda that's on our website, on this issue, there's 5 pages missing. It starts under the word introduction. Those previous 5 pages aren't there.
Andrew, can you fix that up, please? Thank you. Okay, where are we at? 4.7, approval to notify plan changes 38 to 41 of the Taupō District Plan. Good afternoon, Hilary. Nice to see you.
Good afternoon.
All recovered and up and bright and breezy?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Good.
Right, it feels like a bit of a big moment actually to finally be bringing these up to you. I've just got a couple of things to sort of just quickly run over. So just a looking back, we've this is sort of 3.5 years worth of work really. We've chopped and changed and changed approach a few times and waited to see what the government was going to do and changed after that but all those conversations and engagement and work that we've done throughout that time has filtered through into these first 4 that we've brought to you today, and then we've got 2 more to bring you in September, so some more reading, sorry. Since we last spoke at our last workshop, we obviously had pretty extensive pre-consultation process where we had some really good feedback. We got quite a lot of support, which often, when people support plan changes, they often don't tell us, so it was really good to get that level of support. We also got a lot of constructive feedback, and so we made quite a lot of changes to all the plan changes based on that feedback. So I've just got a couple of little updates for today. So Nick's just handing out 2 extras. We've just got an addition to the Strategic Directions, Section 32. It's just an outline on Te Kaupapa Kaitiaki. The Strategic Directions chapter actually takes in the principles of the document. However, we just sort of missed out the story, I guess, of why that document is important and how it's been taken into account. So that's just a bit of an addition to the Section 32. Obviously that document's still in draft, but we still just feel that that's really important that it's picked up and shown how that we've integrated the philosophy from that document, in particular through the Strategic Directions chapter. Just a couple, and the other handout is the support from JMA partner Rokawa. So I've just been waiting on that and it was missing from your agenda package, so that's come through today and can now be accepted. So sorry, I wasn't sure it was going to come today, so I had changed that resolution, but we can go back to the original one now. And just a couple of little bits in there that you won't have seen much in the plan changes. The first in the town centre, the reason you haven't seen these is because they're very sort of mechanical, technical changes. In the town centre plan change, we've just made a change there. Our veranda requirements, which basically says when someone builds a shop, they need to put a veranda out on the street frontage or the laneway frontage. At the moment, they also include our service lanes, which is obviously not where we want a veranda when you've got trucks and things driving through. So that's really just a correction of an unintended consequence from a plan change a while ago. So we're just tidying that up while we're in the town centre. So we didn't make a big deal out of that one because it really does not affect anyone except make it easier, that doesn't cause issues when anyone's going through that process. The other one was fault lines. So we haven't made a big deal out of this one because this is kind of what I'm thinking of as a tidy up or a sweeper plan change to come through behind some other work. So you remember back at the start of this process, we got GNS to map our new fault lines, and all that work got loaded into our LIM process, and all the landowners at that time were notified and talked through that process. But what we so that's all sorted, all the new stuff sorted. What we haven't sorted is the old fault lines which still sit within the district plan. So basically just taking them off. They're old, they're using old technology, they're probably wrong, so they just need to go. So that's basically all I wanted to quickly cover off. The process from here obviously is to notify under the RMA, so we kick into that first schedule process with formal submissions under the Resource Management Act. So I guess my only other note was that they still won't be perfect, these plan changes, but we've got that RMA process which is obviously, a really it's a really good process for working out those tensions and balances and making sure that we've got it right. So we're really comfortable that these are in a really good state to go out for notification.
Good
one. So yeah, I'll take it as read, but I'm
Yep.
happy to take any questions
Awesome.
on in particular issues.
Thanks, Hilary. That's the show on the road. A lot of work. It's only just the start of the process, I suppose, but well done, and thank you for getting it to this stage. And obviously, we'll hear back from submitters if I've got it wrong, but yeah, look forward to that. So as suggested recommendation up there, can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Guy, seconded by Councillor Leonard. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Thanks, Hilary. All right, 4.8, climate change, adoption of emissions reduction targets and directive. Here we have Aidan. Good afternoon, sir.
Kia ora koutou. All right.
Thanks, Kirsty. All right, sir.
Cool.
Floor is yours.
We're seeking that Council adopts some emissions reduction targets for council operations, and also an emissions reduction directive, which sort of sets the expectations that from now on our advice and our business cases and our investment plans consider emissions impacts and reduction options as well. So these are sort of logical first steps, and they follow on from Council signing the local government leaders' climate change declaration in 2019, and through the long-term plan, in response to feedback from the community, putting some operational funding in to address climate change. So the targets that we propose, they're in line with the national targets set in legislation and recent carbon budgets adopted by government. So meeting these targets will basically demonstrate that Taupō District Council, through its operations, is doing its fair share and supporting the national targets. These targets are for a steady decrease in emissions from our operations, which will require a change, but officers have identified a number of investment opportunities that are low cost or actually save money that will help us to meet these targets. The directive, again, it sets the expectation that this is something we consider in future where there are emissions impacts, that we look for options to reduce those. And it also sets out that we will take a robust cost-benefit approach to assessing those options so that we're still spending ratepayers' money wisely. The directive also reinforces the targets, and it sets out that the next long-term plan in 2024 is when we'll be putting forward investment proposals to you to consider to help us meet those targets. And the directive lastly places an onus on partnership and embracing te ao Māori when we consider emissions reductions options. So just to sum up, look, we've always sought to reduce our impact on the environment, and there's a number of things Council already does to reduce its emissions across various parts of the organisations. This is really about formalising that approach and making sure we do it consistently. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you very much, sir. Any questions? Environmental portfolio holder, Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I just wanted to commend Aidan and Nick. They attended the Lakes of Waterway Action Group meeting a fortnight ago. Jane Penton's in the house there. She had a really good turnout. So I think commend the work you're doing in getting a strategy underway. So thank you. It's well engaged. Thank you.
Acknowledge, Jane. Nice to see you. All right. Any other questions of Aidan? Councillor Body.
Chairman, I think it's on page 63, one of 2 pages, that responsible and efficient use of ratepayers' money. How's that going to be worked out? It's safe to ensure the cost of measurements to reduce emissions don't outweigh the benefits. How are you going to attempt to do that?
The directive actually is quite specific on that. And the central government has adopted an approach. Treasury and the NZTA and a whole bunch of partners who do quite robust business cases have adopted a shadow carbon price, which is basically what they expect New Zealand, the cost to New Zealand to be to reduce emissions. And there's a price in there, and it's scheduled over 30 years. The price changes. There's high and low range. But what that tells you is if you're paying more than that price per tonne of carbon, you're probably taking on an action that's too expensive. There will be cheaper options elsewhere throughout New Zealand that can achieve that. So that's the metric we'll use to assess benefit.
That's a model that's accurate.
It's a position that will change. It's something Treasury will update and keep up to date. But it's best practice at the moment for how you assess what is a fair amount to pay to reduce emissions. You don't want to be paying too much. There will be cheaper options out there, and that will force you to identify the best options that would reduce the most emissions.
Further comments, Chair. We recently received a letter from a doctor, the Molecule of Life. Did we all read it?
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, I did, and I'm happy to speak to it. And no disrespect to the good doctor, but what he presented was actually a straw man argument, which was unhelpful in terms of this strategy.
You, Mr. Chairman, this is the difficulty that I have making any decisions on this particular subject, because we get so much documentation given us to try and make our minds up who is speaking for the papers that I've read. So it's a very difficult area to get into, and while I'll accept such as emissions from our landfill, safe buildings, etc., they're easy to ascertain. And what was interesting listening to it used to be the Minister of Agriculture at lunchtime in regards to the program on Country Calendar about the Maori incorporation. I think it was cutting down native to plant pine, and the fact that the recognition of those native plants may be able to be used as against the pines. There's a whole lot of fors and against. So in this one here I'm going to sit out, and I'm not prepared to make any decisions. Well, I don't have the knowledge or the background or the facts to make a proper decision.
Thank you, Councillor Body. Councillor Mack.
I do commend you that we're trying to do the right thing. I think we've had that discussion before. I think for me, and again, I'm a realist, which I'm sure a lot of us are, and we talk about all these things that we're going to do to better our environment, etc., and also on the understanding that we're also going to put a lot of people at a disadvantage. And I take Turangi for a prime example, because I always talk about Turangi, but we're talking about the public transport and electric vehicles and all those sort of things that are going to help, if you like, the climate. But you're going to leave smaller communities behind. As a council, we're going to do the best we can, but we're not going to be including Turangi because we don't have public transport. We don't have people who can afford the electric vehicles. So I look at all this as being really difficult for smaller communities who are just trying to survive, and then being told, the environment's really important, which we all agree, but if you're just trying to live, this isn't the top of your agenda. And I know we've got to start somewhere, but I just feel that we have to bring all these people, and we talk about the journey, we have to explain to people that this is why we're doing what we're doing and how we can help them, because none of this is going to help them. We have to have 2 cars down there if we have 2 people in a house, because we can't get from A to B, that sort of thing. It's really hard reading it, because I understand what we're trying to do, and if you're in a city you can make all these differences, but little communities like ours, this is just not on the radar even.
No, that's right. But as the point was made, we've got to start somewhere. We've got to get this thing on the road. It's real. It's happening. So
The only point I'd make is if I think back to the 2021 LTP, when we agreed some additional funding for this work, what the community was asking for wasn't dramatic. It was that, hey, when you're going to go build a building, can you at least think about, is it worth investing in solar panels and green materials? So it was stuff you're already doing, but doing it well. It wasn't dramatic changes, and that's sort of the genesis, and that is where we're starting.
Through the chair, just I think obviously with this our strategy, obviously this is a realistic actions, it's a realistic outcome. So the council body makes a point about the cost. That can change. But I think in John's, John's point, I don't think you have to convince the younger generations too much why we should be doing stuff. It's a long burning thing, isn't it? Future generations. So there's going to be some people hurt in the way, I guess. But in the long run, it's something that needs to be done.
Councillor Taylor.
Just commend Aidan and team you're working with on the work you've done. Thank you for that. Appreciate this. Look, it's a vexed subject. There are polarised positions and opinions from conspiracy theorists on the far left to the far right and everyone in between. But at the end of the day, we're going to end up paying for it one way or another. And particularly when you look at the carbon emissions from the landfill. We either spend money and reduce it, or we just hand it over to the government. My view is we should spend money that's just meaningful and makes a difference rather than just handing out, because we have no choice in this. So thank you for the work you've done. I'm happy to move it.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Park.
Yes, Your Worship, I'm happy to second the recommendations. We signed the Local Government Climate Change Accord. We have to show leadership in our community in regards to reduction targets and directives, and we need to be in the sandpit, so to speak. I mean, going forward with future funding and whatnot, there will be climate change, probably levels in applications and whatnot, like there are environmental values, iwi participation, and everything else. So, I just think that it's a no-brainer, really, and thank you for the work.
Any other questions of Aidan? Okay, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Moved by Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Park. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against?
I'm abstaining and have no objections to the paper that's brought before us. I think it's an excellent paper, but I'm not going to make that vote.
Just
so
abstain.
I'll abstain. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, the recommendation is carried. Thank you, Aidan.
Thank you very much.
Good. 4.9, Taupō District Council Performance Report, July 2022.
Thanks, Your Worship. So I'll just make a couple of quick comments whilst Andrew and Pernell come up to take you through the report. Really the only two things I was going to make mention of, one is just a reflection really for the audience that yesterday Councillor Taylor and His Worship the Mayor presented our submission on the Three Waters entity proposal to the Select Committee. My observation of that sitting in the room was that it went incredibly well. It was presented very articulately, and the committee asked some very good and pressing questions. I think there was one element in particular which our submission might have been unique on, and the committee took quite an interest in, which was around the Chief Executive of DIA's ability to be able to influence the process between now and establishment date. So the committee took quite a bit of interest in that and what that might look like. So I think the position of the council and the community was put very clearly to the Select Committee. In terms of that, the process from here is that the government are on quite an ambitious time frame. Their time frame is that they were planning on reporting back to Parliament on the 11th of November with a full report of the submissions, with a view of the legislation passing by the end of the sitting year in Parliament. So we'll obviously keep watching that as it goes through. The other one that I just want to highlight there, Your Worship, is the Councilmark Report that I talk about in the start of the performance report. I'm really proud of our team, including councillors who worked with the assessors through that process, but more importantly the work that we've done since 2018 when we had our last review, which at that point came out as a triple B. And this time we've been upgraded to an A, which puts us in the forefront of councils nationally. And some of the commentary in particular was very pleasing given where we were at with the effects of COVID and the like. And in particular, there was some very good commentary around our financial strategy and capability of our finance team, which was really pleasing given that you're aware that we have been struggling in that place for us over the last little while. So it was nice to get that recognition despite the challenges we've had around sickness and the like. The other key element, which I think we can all take a pat on the back, was some of the commentary around our relationships with iwi, which had come directly from the conversations that the assessors had with iwi through that process, which we weren't party to or privy to. So that's always really nice as well, because that's a place where we had the opportunity to speak freely and frankly, and the results of that were really positive in terms of the work that we'd done. So I highlight that because clearly staff have been involved in that, but as have you through some of the pretty brave decisions you've made over the last 3 years, and that seems to be coming to pass. So, Your Worship, happy to leave it there from me from the high level, but pass it over to Andrew and Pernell to take you through the report.
Thank you. Welcome, Pernell.
Thank you, Worship. I won't take too much time. I'll start with finance, which is not in the report. You'll recall that this time of the financial year, our financial reporting takes a hiatus over July and August while we work with auditors to finalise the results from the last financial year. So we're on that hiatus at the moment, and we return to normal service. We'll resume at the end of the September quarter. I do have some numbers in front of me though for the financial year, it was a pleasing financial year. We're just working with the auditors to finalise these numbers at the moment, but revenue came in stronger than expected, 144 million versus a target of 123.8. That's mostly driven by the success that we had with grants and central government subsidies during the year. Controllable OPEX came in under budget, about 2 million under budget, overall we achieved an accounting surplus of 52 million against a budget of 24, and that's a combination of those two factors, being up on subsidies and grants and being down on operating expenditure.
Sorry, Andrew, just to clarify, so operating expenditure down 2 million?
Yeah, it came in 2 million under budget. So
wow.
In controllable operating expenditure, which is the stuff including personnel costs, maintenance costs and general OPEX that we have some control over, we came in at 63.4 versus a budget of 66.3. So that's a good result.
Well done.
It's good control of that expenditure. Capital expenditure, we talked to you quite a bit about capital expenditure during the year, and the fact that the labour market and the market for materials wasn't allowing us to do all that we wanted to do last year. We ended up with a total capital expenditure number of 59.2 million versus an original budget of 108.4. But what we have done with CapEx now is replanned into this year, replanned into the other years ahead in our long-term plan, and so we're just spending for best value at the moment and trying to get as much and as higher impact stuff done as possible. I won't speak to all of the strategic priorities in detail. Gareth's already touched on some of them in his opening comments, so I'll pass over to Pernell to talk about significant projects.
Cool. Thanks, Pernell.
Ngā mihi o te Ātiahi. Good afternoon, everybody. Your Worship, Councillors, good to see you. This month's update on significant projects shows a % increase from last month's update, from 48% to 52%. It's an average across the board. Couple of specific movements. Kinloch wastewater treatment plant upgrades now finished. It's no longer reported here. And this is also the last report for Kittle Drive roundabout as it's complete. And memorably, tranche 1 of the Three Waters funding that we got back at the beginning of COVID, 8.32 million, that's now complete with all projects wrapped up and having spent the grant funds. We're just wrapping up the project completion report now. Last month, the Taupō North wastewater solution time was amber. This month it's green, and that's as a result of positive feedback from the hapu on appointment of members to the steering committee, so a good step forward. The Kinloch Drinking Water Standards New Zealand upgrade budget was red. Now it's green as a result of finalisation of the annual plan funding. And next month, just to wrap up, you'll likely see a couple more projects. The Project Governance Group meet next week, and we're going to be looking through a number of the annual plan projects to select a few additional to report as part of significant projects update to you all. Have you got any questions?
Airport? How's the airport going?
Very well.
Good.
I've actually been away 2 weeks sampling other airports, and I would have to say that ours is looking very good. The windows are in, which is it's quite a big change when you look out there, and if you can see it through the all of the fencing around it. And I'd have to say the Rimu trees are in, which is, for anyone on our steering committee will understand, that's a huge step and a quite momentous. In terms of the budget, we are very near our ceiling in terms of the overall, but positively we're a long way through the project.
Cool. So all on target. Waiora House?
Waiora House, I would probably get Julie Gardine to speak to that. She's the sponsor of that project.
Sorry, I've digressed a little bit, Julie, but yeah, just how we're going up there.
Yeah, so all on track in terms of the construction at Waiora House. As the steering group members will know, there was a underground diesel tank that was found, which did cause us a little bit of challenge to make sure that that was removed. We needed to do that from an environmental perspective, but very much all on track in terms of time frames and budget.
Cool, thanks Julie. All right, thank you Pernell, good to see you. 2 weeks in airports, eh? How many cancelled flights?
Oh, no cancelled flights.
Oh, good.
No, I felt like it was the movie with Tom Hanks.
Top Gun. That's
Desert Island, soccer ball.
Sorry, Andrew, you've been nowhere near as entertaining as Pernell, but yeah. All right, any questions of Andrew and Pernell? Councillor Body.
No further comment on any of those significant projects. They're all kosher. Yep. Okay. That's fine.
As per the report.
Thank you.
Cool. Very good. Nothing else wrap it up, Mr. CEO, or that's it? Okay, recommendation up there for performance report. Do I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor Guy. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, guys. All right. Taupō District Council, Council engagement, September 22, 2022. Shaney James.
Thank you.
Your moment.
Thank you, Your Worship. We had scheduled an additional council meeting in September on the 13th of September, but that is now no longer required. So just one meeting to go on the 27th of September, and everything else is as per the list. Thank you.
Ooh, one less, eh? Okay, thank you. Any other queries on that? Other mover, those engagements be accepted. Thank you, Councillor Kingy. Seconded by Councillor Leonard. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Members' reports. 4.11. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I attended the Taupo Tourism Sustainability launch. Kylie was there as well, in Your Worship. I didn't stay for the workshop, but obviously it's all around about environmental tourism, so there'll be more news on that moving forward. I think there's a workshop in December, I think, or so it's being activated. Went to a kids greening Taupo workshop this morning, very engaging committee, representatives of schools, DOC, predator free, do a lot of great work obviously with the planting days, etc. So a very big part of our climate change actually policy with regeneration of things like native trees and planting. So, and also I did a little tour with Didimo Dave the other day around the district. Hanimai. It was very, very interesting to see what his perspective, what he's doing, and what perhaps we should be doing. But he's very, very complimentary about our council, helping out with the vehicle and things like that. So, and local.
You spent the day with them.
Pardon?
Did you go out with them?
Yes.
Oh, good point.
Yeah. It was very good, so I enjoyed that. So otherwise, it's pretty quiet. Otherwise, thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Park.
As I said earlier, I attended the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Joint Committee in Hamilton yesterday, which was the last one for the Terranium, and we farewelled the retiring chair, Councillor Hugh Verco, who has been the chair of that committee for 12 years. So it was a lovely occasion to be at.
Awesome. Thank you. Passing on Taupo's appreciation of his work. Appreciate it. Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Monday of last week I attended the Waikato Regional Transport Committee, where we also farewelled Councillor Verco in his other chairmanship role of that committee. It was a formality. There was nothing of any great significance. What is occurring today, while we're sitting here, is submissions are being heard in Hamilton on the public transport strategy. and there have been submissions from us already submitted on that. Gareth already alluded to the select committee yesterday. I just want to acknowledge Louise and Nick sitting down the back. All we did was present. The hard work was done in preparing the works, and I want to thank them both for the words they presented and for the time they spent with us, getting us prepared to answer any questions. Now, the section that Gareth alluded to is in our submission was Schedule 1 and clauses 21 to 24 of the proposed Act. The way that's currently worded, it's a very low trust model, and it's basically once royal assent is given to the Act, it means the CE of the water entity has to be presented with our annual plan, any changes to our district plan zoning, any purchase or disposal of assets, and a whole range of other things. So basically you have an unelected CE of an entity who potentially has a power of veto over anything and everything we decide at this table. Unlikely to occur, but when asked a question on that, it was around trust, and I said, well, trust is a two-way street. Obviously no one else had submitted on that because, as Gareth has said, caught their attention. So thank you to everyone here for having confidence in the Mayor and I to present. I'll take it, Gareth's words, that it went all right. It's a bit hard when you're sitting there talking into a screen. Thank you.
Good. Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Rankin? No? Councillor Mack?
I actually went to one of those in Hamilton, actually, with somebody who was submitting, and I have to say, the actual committee, or half the committee, I think it's quite unfortunate that most people who submit aren't councillors, and they actually are getting asked questions that, to be honest with you, they don't know much about, because of course it's a loaded thing that nobody was actually given any information. It was an interesting time, and I have to say that the committee were interested, but I think probably they'd already decided what they were going to do, to be honest with you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Councillor Leonard? No? Councillor Kingy? Councillor Guy?
No, just attended the Amplify board meeting last week, and just would like to acknowledge the work that Amplify did around the Geothermal Week event. Very successful, and hopefully will lead on to a biannual event in the future.
Cool. Thank you, Councillor Guy. Councillor Body? No? Just as I mentioned earlier, self and Deputy CEO Julie were very kindly invited to welcome or co-host or help the visitation of the UK Trade Minister and Mrs. Trevelyan, Minister Trevelyan, and the new High Commissioner to the UK, to New Zealand from the UK. Just a new appointee, Laura, I think. So, Iona. I didn't get it wrong on the day, I can assure you. But hey, it was an honoured day, and it was, you know, it was one of those lovely Saturdays where the big Range Rovers turned up with flags and all that sort of thing. So I just explained to them how honoured we were as a district that they selected us as a location, and one of our marquee products, Miraka, that they knew about from the UK is just fantastic, and right here in our district. So that was that was a lovely occasion. All right, thank you, councillors. Could I have a mover, please? The members' reports. Thank you, Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Guy. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Okay, we will now. That is the public part of the meeting. Thank you very much, members of the public.